at ya, at ya. Tell you what's master, coming at ya, coming at ya. Rhyme style disaster, coming at ya, at ya. Tell you what's master, coming at ya. Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-hosts Christy Kelly and Brooks Crenshaw. And our guest this week is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He is a physician, a former naval officer, lieutenant commander, candidate for Congress, and political and social and commentator about all things global. Dr. Jasser, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Charles. Thanks for having me, and love your show. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. It's good to talk to you again. We've talked about many topics, and again, we will try to solve some of the smaller issues, Islam, healthcare, politics, all that kind of Donald Trump, whatever the case is. But we spoke earlier, you made a really good point that healthcare is on everyone's mind. You are in the trenches. So talk about from your side, and I'm sure the group here will talk about what they've experienced and what they hear, but from a doctor's point of view, what you think the problems are with healthcare, and what the solutions are.
Yeah, I can't tell you enough. When my wife and family and I looked at running for Congress, not only was it about a lot of the battles I've been fighting since 9/11, which we'll get into, but really as a physician in primary care, running my own business, the son of a physician, my parents, my father escaped Syria to be able to not only practice our faith more freely in America than he could in any Muslim majority country, but have his own business, to be able to have a personal relationship with his patient and just the type of medicine that I wanted to emulate was why I went to medical school and was on a Navy scholarship. And now as we look since Obamacare or the ACA, which is better called the Unaffordable Care Act, we see sort of a confluence, a sonic boom, if you will. COVID operationalized sort of the weaponization of healthcare for a political movement, which was the far left, socialism, etc. But now we saw a shutdown, the longest shutdown in our government's history was pushed about subsidies. And I can tell you my patients every day, I'm on the front lines of medicine. I'm not just talking about healthcare and on a spreadsheet or as a technocrat, but rather somebody who's been trying to take care of my patients in the insurance market for 28 years. And an ethicist who cares about what's right and moral in medicine. I've seen consolidation in healthcare, lack of transparency, that the administrative cost in healthcare has gone from 10% to over 30% of care. So now there's no more 70% of care is only what really is at point of care. The rest is all feeding people that are making 7, 8 digits in C-suites. And when they talk about subsidies, those subsidies are to care for the people in the C-suites, not for patients. So I see so many things happening that is just un-American. It's not about competition. The same procedures I do in my office cost 10 times as much across the street at the hospital because they're subsidized or because they're a nonprofit. The nonprofit status of hospitals is a scam. They're functional corporations that are in Fortune 5, Fortune 10 companies, and yet they're nonprofits. So there's so many problems, and we need people in Congress that have lived it, that know the pathologies and can represent our patients and not represent big pharma and insurance companies.
Well, let me ask you a very quick but very difficult question. Because I try to be as fair-minded as possible. So I understand the people who say that, personally, their costs have gone up, or, a lot of people are, the percentage of people who go bankrupt because of healthcare and all those problems, and they want to fix that. But at the same time, nothing in the history has convinced me that government can solve the problems like they would run it efficiently, for one. So, because a lot of people say the solution is universal healthcare. But also, you also make a point that kind of mirrors, I work a lot more in education than healthcare, but it mirrors that in the sense that, especially in higher ed, whenever the government tried to drive the cost down and make it affordable for everyday people, right? All of those subsidies and all of that, price control made the prices skyrocket, right? Nobody's getting a college degree for $9,000 anymore, right? You were able to do that even if you adjust for inflation, it was still far cheaper before the government got involved. So while I understand the desire for someone to fix it, I think they're looking in the wrong place for one. They're trying to solve the problem several rungs up the ladder instead of at the base. And there is a true concern. We had Charles Camosy on once talking about, it's worse in Canada, but how it's coming here, how they want, where the government has all the control, all the countries where the government controls healthcare, they get to decide kind of who lives and what they're going to cover. And, you're this age with this comorbidity, so we're not going to give you that needed service because it will be wasted on you. Those kind of things. So when you take all of that together and take emotional motion out, is it really feasible and smart to say, let's solve our healthcare problem with the government?
It is not. And nothing done by the government is done better than it is by free markets, by competition, by transparency. Every country that has tried to socialize healthcare, be it the UK with the NHS or Canadian healthcare, it doesn't work. It ends up rationing by wait lines, by mediocre care rather than the excellent care we get by leading the world in healthcare in America. These types of things in America, we pay now for your health care 7 different times. Your employer pays off of it by decreasing your paycheck. You then pay Medicare in your paycheck with a tax. You then pay your insurance company, and your insurance rates are jacked up because when you go to the ER, they're paying for free care by jacking up your rights, your rates. So there's 7 different points of care that you're paying for the exact same care, which is exactly socialized medicine, which is the cartels that is healthcare. So they consolidate into 3 or 4 different companies. And this is no longer free markets because most patients don't even know what their prices are. And Charles, we're talking about 25%, 23% of the GDP. And we're talking about a significant part of the federal budget, which is 18% of the federal budget. So if you look at Saul Alinsky and so many other far left extremists, they tell you once you control over 15% of the federal budget of any government, you end up controlling society. And that's exactly what Obama was all about during the President Obama's term, was that get your foot in the door and socialize healthcare, and you will then destroy the economy, free market, and start controlling the rest of the economy. And that's what we're seeing happening as we see even so-called conservatives buying into subsidies and other things which are just un-American.
Brooks, everything he said was great, but he didn't make my health insurance cheaper. So, so what is the problem from the private side? Well, I mean, they're making big money. They're scamming. They're not telling us what prices are. I mean, now while they're offsetting the emergency room, like he mentioned, which is true, and also the reason we lead the world in healthcare, the practice of it, that's another thing. Healthcare and the actual services are kind of different. You're talking about paying it, but we are head and shoulders above everyone else in technology. So you got to pay for that. But wouldn't you say that those private companies are getting a little fat on the hog there?
Well, I think in a corporatist way, right? In league with the state. Dr. Jasser mentioned getting the foot in the door. There was a really important foot that was in the door previously. I teach this in a business course at the local HBCU, and what I ask my class is, do you know why you get your healthcare through your work? And they don't know. And the reason that they don't know is because during the Great Depression, FDR imposed salary caps, $100,000. That's the most you can pay somebody. So in order to compete, to get the best talent, they said, we'll pay you the cap, we'll cover healthcare through the work. And that's an artifact of the foot being in the door during the New Deal era. Yeah, this is an incremental move toward single payer. This has always been the move. This has always been the objective. And every single step weakens the healthcare system to the point where the public's like, what's the solution? It's got to be single payer. And you mentioned, Dr. Jasser, the price distortion. I mean, anytime you divorce the point of sale and the point of service, like, I don't know what it's going to cost to just do it, right? There's no real market feedback there. One of the things that we look at in class is what healthcare doesn't insurance cover, right? What are the elective things, right? Whether you're talking about plastic surgery or peptides and HRT and that kind of thing. If you look at those things, the quality has gone up and the costs have gone down. That's what markets do. And the reason that healthcare has gotten more expensive, just like education, administrative bloat again. You mentioned that. That's absolutely true. And I think we need to move closer to markets. Dr. Jasser, what do you think about some of the proposals that have been made recently about opening up insurance to the Amazons and the Walmarts and opening that up to where there's a lot more competition in that regard?
I think Senator Paul is exactly right on that. The opening the insurance market, if you will, that's been a cartel that has, amazingly during COVID, the insurance cartel was banking money as utilization went down 70% as all we were focused on one virus instead of all the other diseases. And that needs to be broken, that cartel. And you do that by creating competition, allowing competition across state lines.
Yeah, I was
And
just gonna say, can you tell
yeah,
people? I don't think everybody knows that. They don't know that people are limited. So tell them the limitations on, basically where you can. It's like the drug dealers are, having this is my area, and you stay out of my area. There's certain areas where you are allowed to sell insurance, so to speak. So talk about why that is.
Yeah, and what happens is there are even disease-specific limitations where they have to cover everything in every insurance plan, and state limitations where they have blocked out competition by saying, if I live in Arizona, I can't buy Idaho Blue Cross, I can't buy Illinois, and whatever other competitive markets might exist with better insurance plans that I would want. They don't want that competition because they bake into the state legislature supports and subsidies for the particular populations within the state and the lobbies that exist. So it's, if you look at what the proposals that are before the White House and Dr. Oz and others are appropriately doing, health savings accounts where you allow patients to actually, with their feet, decide where they want to spend their money, liberalizing that process a bit so that they have more choice, and then making the costs more transparent so that we know what we're buying as patients. I'm a patient, just like I'm a doctor, and I can't tell you how absurd the pricing systems are. And I get my EOB, which is an explanation of benefits after a few months, just like patients do. And ultimately, the horse is so far out of the barn that you don't know what you were paying for, let alone the rates that the insurance company agreed to, when there should be a competitive market across the states, across the country, and there isn't because it's locked into each state.
Chrissy, I want you to get in here. Feel free to ask any questions or follow up what you want, but I do want you to give me your thoughts on what it may do, how they handle healthcare, what they're doing now, and all these proposed changes, especially from the left, where they say just to have the government run everything, what it does for the quality of care. Because wouldn't we create a situation where fewer people would want to be, researchers, doctors, and nurses if you can't make as much money as you can? Because if you have to insure everybody, including people who have previous conditions, all these other things, people who don't track their health in advance and stay healthy and incentivize themselves that way, and they only show up when it's emergency room time. Um, and you're capping the amount that people can make at some point. People aren't going to make the money that they can make now, and they won't want to do it.
I think we're always going to need, and there will always be good healthcare providers that, want to be there for their patients and that will, find a way and let the market dictate. Because if it's a good doctor, then you're going to pay his rates. I do want to pivot just a little bit, because right now, if you watch the news, we are approaching a measles epidemic if you listen to CNN. So I definitely wanted to ask Dr. Jasser, what do you feel about the fact the children vaccine schedule? What they did is they did eliminate some of the mandatory, vaccines that are recommended. And now the news is telling us that because, they're not requiring, I guess, the measles vaccine, that now there's all of these measles cases and it's an epidemic around the corner. Can you speak to one, were you in agreement with that, loosening, the regulations on some of the vaccines that children have to get? And what's the truth behind this measles? Are we facing an epidemic regarding measles returning?
Listen, I'm in primary care every day. I see patients. My clinic stayed open throughout the COVID pandemic, and I was on the front lines seeing patients throughout the pandemic. And as an ethicist, every day I talk to my patients, and in the hospital, I do consultations on the most difficult cases where doctors may see one thing that they want to be done, and the patient or the family feel some disagreement with what needs to be done. That's what informed consent is all about. And just like when we raise our kids, you find that with children, you get them to be more adult and to be more mature and responsible in their choices by giving them the freedom to make some mistakes. So immunity through vaccination, we were trying to educate the country through COVID that it's about herd immunity. It's not about 100% immunity. I'm not seeing a measles pandemic. Now, I haven't looked at the latest data in the last week or two. We are seeing a little bit of a spike. But the reality is, if you talk to most pediatricians, there's so much coercion done with the vaccines where initially, let's look at hepatitis. The indication for hepatitis vaccines for hepatitis B is quite limited, especially to adults. Now, globally, one of the reasons America has the lowest incidence of liver cancer is because of hepatitis vaccine in the young. So my kids got vaccinated, but I would not want that to be forced or snuck in as part of the normal process of every delivery, where many parents find out months later, oh, my kid got vaccinated in these 15 things. I didn't really understand that. And what happens is it creates a inherent distrust with our system, our treatment, where we're no longer partners with the patient, but actually they see us as controllers, autocrats that are trying to push things upon them. And actually, it then creates a lesser vaccination rate because they don't want to get care. They don't want to be part of the system. So never, especially, one of the beauties of freedom and healthcare freedom, especially, is we learn that the best way to get more people engaged in what we believe to be science is by choice, not by coercion.
One last thing, before we shift to another topic, because there are many. There's a lot. This is a major thing, the healthcare in a country with over 300 million people. So comparing it to the smaller countries just doesn't really track well. So we all understand it's difficult. So you got one shot, you got one thing you can start with. What would be the one thing that you think would have the biggest impact if you could only change that one thing?
Yeah, I would. Boy, if I could change one thing, I think the reform necessary is basically aligning Medicare payments with inflation, number one, so that we have equity and also parity with larger institutions where you get the same service for the same payment in healthcare. So what I get paid for a EKG or for an examination or for a test in my clinic would be the same as what it costs in the emergency room in the hospital. That parity and transparency would then allow an equal playing field so that we could compete. Right now, the Optums of the world are buying not only hospitals but pharmacies, etc. And then once it's under one roof, they have litigation control and other things where they're not exposed to the same medical malpractice issues because or Stark laws because it's under one company. So that one reform would be price parity and transparency.
Mm, I'm trying to, I'm looking at the time. Do I? Because I wanted to say, for clarity on the pricing thing, while I understand it, do you think that there would be any validity to people who would argue that that's coming close to a price control?
No, no, transparency where right now, my dad's generation are the ones that basically sold out to Medicare and said, well, we'll let them set the prices and every other insurance company follows Medicare. So there's one price set throughout healthcare unless you're in a cash-based basis.
Right.
So the bottom line is there's two prices. One is for the hospitals, which are now employing many doctors and insurance companies, and the others is for private practice. Private practice is dying unless we give them back the ability to compete at an equal playing field. And American healthcare will die if private practice, which is ingenuity and entrepreneurship in healthcare, dies.
All right then. Now I want to talk briefly about the few minor things going on around the world. I know we got a lot of fires. Trump claims he's put out so many of them. I think he's made some of them lesser, but he didn't really put them out. Um, but when whatever he does, it seems like another one pops up. He's playing whack-a-mole. So right now, I mean, you talk about your parents being from Syria. We're talking Iran now, but there was some issues going on there a couple months ago. I haven't looked to see what the latest is there. But talk about, let's start with Iran since that's happening now. What your thoughts on the uprising there and, the response and the lack thereof from our higher ups here in America?
Yeah, I think, you look at global national security issues, and number one has been sealing the border. It has stopped the hemorrhaging. Obviously we have millions of folks in the United States that were not vetted that are a threat, and the global radical Islamists now we're starting to figure out. You look at the Somali fraud that happened in Minnesota and the exploitation of so much of our taxpayers' money. That's finally being exposed. But at the end of the day, globally, we have a president that finally says what he means and does what he says he's going to do, and people are on notice. You saw with finally we have a defense of our ally Israel, who has been trying to recuperate from October 7 and make sure that the radical Islamists that they're surrounded by, especially Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, and others, have been defeated and decimated. And President Trump appropriately made sure that Iran did not have a nuclear weapon, along with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And that regional strength, if you will, has created a peace in which you actually see the greatest anti-nuclear program possible in Iran is coming from the people of Iran. So the people of Iran finally, now one of the things I've been mainly dedicated to, one of the establishments I've been fighting, one is in healthcare for free markets, but the other is in radical Islam against the establishment, the clerics across the Muslim world that have been suffocating women's rights, minority rights, gay rights, feminist rights, and others because they're living in 10th century Islam, and as a result have not had any revolutions against that or an enlightenment, if you will. I argued at Oxford back in October 24 debate where I said I, as a Muslim, have a religious approach to my faith with God personally, but Islam itself as a faith is not compatible with democracy. So what do we do with that? I said, listen, the first evidence of a government that was compatible with democracy that was founded by Christians was America, was Europe after the revolutions, after the Enlightenment. Islam has not gone through that. So Iran now, for the first time in over 1,000 years, you see a popular revolt against political Islam or theocratic Islam. And I can tell you that this is coming as a result of the fact that the Iranian regime is closed in. They no longer are able to get sustenance from Russia, from the exposure of trying to say that they have foreign enemies through their anti-Semitism and threats on Israel. So that has gone away. And the people now, if you look at their currency, it crashed a few months ago. And thus more people went to the streets than ever before. The revolutions of '09, '17, '21, and '23, which were women's revolutions, which were anti-clerical revolutions, are now come to a head with the economic revolution. So it may become a one that finally topples the clerics, but it is a move towards, it might seem more chaotic, but at the end of the day, it's going to be actually a Middle East that's more akin to Western values than our enemies of the red-green axis, which is the China's Marxists of the world that work with the jihadists.
Before we go into this deeper, I have to ask you because as you talked about our allies in the Middle East, you talked about Israel, you talked about your faith, and you talked about speaking at Oxford. And I got to ask, this has to happen. How often do you speak as passionately as you do about the issues, specifically Islam and reform? Do people ask you, why are you still a Muslim?
I do get asked that frequently, and I say, listen, my faith tradition, I am as outspoken as I am about it because our founding fathers really epitomized a belief in Christianity, the Judeo-Christian tradition, in which they believed that you need to have a personal relationship with God, and the government needs to stay out of the establishment of religion, which is our First Amendment. That's a reform that my family embraced in our faith. And my dad's translation of the Quran, I feel, is a reformist translation. I'm harboring no illusions that this is some kind of majority opinion. It's a minority opinion within Islam. But I do believe that I need to advocate for America and Americanism in order for there to be any chance that that type of Islam, which is not a threat to the West, have any type of ability to succeed. So it's a personal faith, it's a personal interpretation. Is it a dominant one globally? Absolutely not. 90+% of the translations of the Quran are incompatible with the West. 90+% of the governments and militaries that are Muslim majority are a threat to the West, and I have dedicated every breath I can to fight against that. But I can prosecute this case as a devout Muslim who loves God, but the only thing I die for is America. I can prosecute that case better than anyone else, especially against the Ilhan Omars and Zohran Mamdanis of the world that truly are a threat to this country, seditious, and need to be exposed. And that's the battle happening. We're talking about a quarter of the world's population. So if the quarter of the world's population is 1.8 billion people, and 500 million of them believe in political Islam, which is what I believe, the 1.3 billion left need to somehow get back control of their faith, and that's going to be a long process. But the laboratory to do that is in America, and that's what we're trying to do.
Last question before Brooks give. Oh, last question, Christy. Should the president get support the protesters in Iran and get involved?
Absolutely, and not necessarily militarily yet. My opinion on that, and I may not know everything he does about the intelligence, what's happening there. Syria fell, Assad fell despite 10 years of revolution because the Syrian borders were finally sealed by Israel. They stopped weapons coming into Syria in October 24. They stopped money coming in from Russia and met weapons from Russia in October 24. Assad fell in 6 weeks. So I would ask the United States, and if I was in Congress, I'd say, listen, let's seal Iran. Don't let foreign weapons come in anymore, and at least expose that. And that's part of what I think is happening with our presence in the Gulf, etc. But where are you going to drop bombs? I mean, you'd have to basically decimate the military. Now, Israel decimated the Assad military, which ultimately was one of the greatest things that would allow Syria to finally become a post-Ba'athist place, if you will, and we can talk about that. But Iran's military right now is going to be holding out in their republic of fear, if you will, and the people have no weapons. So it might be a longer process for that revolution than we think. But once it's contained and they're not getting foreign support from China, Russia, or other sympathizers, Venezuela's out of the picture, then they're not going to be long lasting, if months at most.
All right, Christy, you had a question.
Yeah, so really quickly, you are running for the Congressional District 4 in Arizona. So I did
Yes.
put out a call to some, Republicans here and told them that we would be interviewing you. So one of the specific questions that I got or comment is, I am hesitant to vote or support Jasser because I am hesitant to elevate the Muslim religion by sending Jasser to Congress. So you did touch on that, how you would be the perfect person, to prosecute the case against radical Islam. But I told him that I was going to, repeat his comment verbatim. So can you speak to those here in Arizona that may be hesitant because you do practice Islam?
That's a great question. And all I would say is post 9/11, since 2003, I have been one of the most public Muslims on this issue nationally of any other Muslim. I've been critical of 99% of the Muslim organizations in America and how seditious and how much of a fifth column many of them are in what they're doing in DEI programs and other things, racializing Islam when it's an ideology. So I would say if I was somebody who was going to elevate Islam or elevate being a Muslim, I would have done it already. And there's no evidence that that's what I'm doing. I'm actually deconstructing the establishment of the Islamic leadership. So it's not I would defy anybody to say that I'm doing any type of evangelism in my faith or any of that. I believe in the Constitution and the fact that there's no faith test to being uh, an American, to taking our oath. I took one oath in my life, which is to defend this country against enemies, foreign and domestic, as a naval officer, and I will do so as a member of Congress. It has nothing to do with my faith. Yes, my faith that I use to believe in God is Islam, but ultimately I do not believe we have a monopoly on heaven. I'm all about religious freedom. It's what I believe in. But I would hold my record of the last 20 plus years of activism against anybody to say that in any ways that's an advocacy for the faith. If anything, it's a realistic, pragmatic approach to the threat of political Islam domestically and globally.
So, Brooks, what do you want to say to that?
Well, so as a veteran myself, we're both Navy men, so go Navy.
Go
Um,
Navy.
we, I did a lot of work with Muslims in Iraq and Afghanistan. I actually worked with some of the Afghans that were coming out during the fall of Kabul, and have worked with some that are here. But that said, they were heavily vetted by someone in the American forces that worked with them. I got to know everything about them before I bring them in, and that kind of thing. That's an important factor. Most Americans don't understand the nuance that you do with regard to Muslim bad, right? There's this notion. And as long as I have known who you were, I have hoped that you were the Martin Luther of Islam, right? Because in terms of human trajectories, Islam is due for that Reformation moment that ushers them into a mainstream global trade and world. And I think some of the Gulf states have addressed this well. I think some of the Gulf states have addressed this better than Europe is, and they're actually warning Europe, saying, "Hey, um, we know the reason you're not going to do this well is because you don't know these Islamists the way that we do." And so that's an important distinction. Another thing that you touched on that I think is of supreme importance is the strange bedfellows of Marxism and Islamism, the enemy of my enemy, right? This is an alliance that ushered in the Ayatollah. This is what we're seeing in Zohar Mamdani. This is what we're seeing in Ilhan Omar. The thing that they both have in common, postmodern, post-truth, say what you need to say to accrue power, and taqiyya. They're roughly the same thing. And that creates a trust problem, right? How do you tell who's telling the truth when the truth is no longer in play and you are free in your doctrine to say whatever it is you need to say to subvert the enemy?
Yeah, I think this is why so much of the public vetting is so important. I was very close to Charlie Kirk and knew him well, and he was actually in the weeks before his assassination was going through Europe talking about this issue, about the threat of Islam to the West, and I didn't disagree with anything most of what he was saying, in that in its current form, it's not compatible with Westernism. So what do we do about that? You need and I've testified to Congress. I would hold up my testimony in 2018 to Senator Cruz's committee, in 2016 to Governor DeSantis, now at the time Congressman DeSantis's committee. I talked about the fact that we need an all of government approach, not just people coming in to be vetted for Americanism, and against political Islam, Islamism. Islamism is not some weird construct I came up with. Those parties, Islamic parties in Arabic, are called Islamiyin, which are Islamists like the Muslim Brotherhood, where their constitution is the Quran. They believe the government to be God. The country is about Islam. Erdogan is running a supposed democracy in Turkey, but yet he's an Islamist, tried and true. He believes that he is the representative of God through the government, and their democratic government is a Quranic based constitution. So that's incompatible with our society, classical liberalism, Western liberty, and especially Americanism, which is why I think America has far more better chance at defeating political Islam than Europe does, because Europe's secular anti-religious democracy has snuffed church-going rate, has snuffed the minority communities, Jewish communities, and others. America is based on pro-religiousness. So this is why I'm a necessary asset in this conversation, because a pro-religious Americanism has a much greater chance at defeating Islamism than an anti-religious secularism where it's growing like wildfire in Europe. And I'll just end with the affinity of Marxism and Islamism is about yeah, they have a common enemy, but it's about collectivism. It's a tribalism. So one tribe is based on a faith identity and racializing the faith. The other is based on a collectivist economic neutralization of any type of of creativity, ingenuity, and entrepreneurship. So they come together. In Egypt, you saw Mubarak was a national socialist and also fed the Islamists. You see this across the Middle East. Now, be careful with saying that the Gulf they understand who the enemy is, but it's sort of like the Colombian government knowing that cocaine is the problem. They're creating and fueling that ideology. That's not where the solution for political Islam is going to come from. The UAE knows how to identify the Muslim Brotherhood, and they will lock them up as they do. But their Sharia state is basically corporate political Islam, but it's not grassroots viral political Islam, which they see as the enemy.
Wow. Last question to you, Christy. Can you get it in? What you got?
Yeah, we have like 3 minutes, Dr. Jasser. Okay. So CD4 is a Dem heavy district. It has a Dem advantage. So this question was from an AZ GOP chair candidate. So it's a prominent Republican. They said point blank, how will you win Democrats and independents? Because Stanton has been worthless. He needs to go. But how are you going to get the Dems and independents to vote for you?
Christy, I'm so glad you asked this because it goes to the other question about elevating Muslims, etc. I have been able to reach across one of the, my finance committee is run by a former Democrat. I have a lot of patients that are known Democrats, moderate Democrats. So I'm able to reach across the aisle religiously to the minority communities, Mormon community, and others. I've been very active in interfaith work. My profile fits very well into Mesa, Tempe, Chandler, the region. We have 3 groups, independents, Democrats, and Republicans. And the profile that would be able to defeat Stanton, he only won by 5 points. We can flip that by, if you look, the registrations have been up. Turning Point Action has noted 10 to 20,000 increased Republican registrations and significant suppression of vote on the Democrats because they can't find anyone to know what Stanton has done. So by suppressing his vote, increasing the Republican, you will find that we should stop the unilateral disarmament on the 4th district. It is one of the swing districts that should be in play nationally, and there's only a few swing districts, and this is definitely one of them. And if we get the fuel to defeat Stanton and dismantle him through ads, etc., he has paper-thin support, and I've got a deep profile that can definitely go toe-to-toe against him.
Well, we will have to leave it there. It's been great. He is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, physician, candidate for the 4th Congressional District in Arizona, and a passionate and strong fighter for America and reforming Islam and getting rid of the Islamists. And I think that's really important, and more people should check him out. Go to his website. Tell them where they can find you.
Z4AZ, Z4AZ.com. Join us, volunteer, help us in the campaign, and we will dismantle Greg Stanton.
Always great talking to you, Zuhdi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got a country to say. Patriot J, I'm saving the day. Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who lame. No, you can't fuck with me. I got a country to say. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to say, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.